So let's start our discussion with the first lecture on cloud computing. So the first topic that we're going to discuss is going to be EC2. So what is EC2? EC2 stands for Elastic Computing Service. There are different compute services available in AWS. For example, you have the container services, you have the serverless options as well. But in this video, we will be talking about the most basic compute service, which is going to be your EC2 service. Now, what is an EC2 service? It is a service which is hosted or it is given by your AWS, which allows you, in a nutshell, what it does is it allows you to host virtual machines. What is a virtual machine? So you can imagine if you want to run an OS similar to what you're running on your physical laptop or PC on the cloud, you are going to be using an EC2 instance. So you're using EC2 to allow you to host virtual machines, which can then run applications on it. It can allow you to easily scale up and scale down within minutes, which means that if you want a higher power machine, for example, with more RAM or with more GPU, then you can do that within minutes. And if you want it with less GPU or with less hardware intensive with less hardware resources, then you can also scale it down as well. You have you have complete control over your machine because you are going to also have your root level access to it as well. And it also has flexibility in cloud instances, which means that you can install any OS that you want. For example, you want to install a Windows OS, a Linux OS, Red Hat. There are multiple options available to you. So I also got some notes on my register as well. So I will be reading that as well. So what are virtual machines? They are basically it helps you to like emulate a physical server and allows you to install an HTTP server to run your application. So if you're creating like a web browser on your application, then you would first want a virtual machine on which you can execute your web browser on it or your application on it. So to run virtual machines, you install a hypervisor on your host machine, which provides the resources to create and run your virtual machine. So first of all, when you're creating your host machine, this virtual machine, it's going to install a hypervisor, which is then going to allow you to actually install an OS and then do all of the things that you want to do. Virtual machines on AWS are called Amazon EC2 Elastic Container, which we just talked about. AWS also installs VMs OS or guest OS. Yeah, so we've talked about this. Some AWS computer services use Amazon EC2 or virtualization, and then we've talked all about this. Okay. Okay, so how are you selecting your OS? So you select your OS by selecting an Amazon Machine Image, AMI for short. So there are different AMI available to you. You can also create your own custom AMI as well. So the difference between OS and AMI is that when you're configuring your AMI, you are selecting which OS do you want, which permissions do you want the OS to have, what applications needs to be pre-installed on the instance when it's booting up, and what are the devices that you want to block. So you can imagine that AMI is like the bigger, it's like you have an AMI here and an AMI. So when you're creating your EC2 instance, so when you're creating, so let me just say when you are creating an EC2 instance, you have to select an AMI, and inside when you're selecting your AMI, you're telling, okay, what OS do I want? For example, I want a Windows OS and I want to run an application which is going to be, for example, let's say main.py, and I'm providing the code for main.py, and I am saying that I want to block a device which has an IP of 172.168.1.3, for example. So these are all the configurations that are going inside the AMI. And then this is going to create your EC2 instance. Now what you can do is that you can have the same AMI, so you can have the same AMI and use that on multiple instances as well. So you can do that as well. Uh, Let me see if I can show you the diagram. So for example, you have this diagram over here. So you have an instance, and for when you were creating your first instance, you created an AMI, and then you were utilizing the same AMI for creating multiple instances. Okay, so you can configure the instance size. Some are pre-built instances, for example. Yes, so there are some instance types as well. So when you are selecting which hardware components do you want in your instance, you are given a variety of options. Let me see if it is written over here, but it's over here. So you have a general purpose, a compute optimized, a memory optimized, and accelerated computing, or your storage optimized. What this basically means is that when you're creating your EC2 instance, you will be given an option to have like a template to use these instance types, because it's going to be like pre-built instance types. So for example, general purpose is something which everybody's using. Compute optimized would be something which is optimized towards computing. Memory is going to be for memory optimizations. So examples could be that if you want like a graphic optimized, that could be used for 3D visualizations and video encodings. If you want like a general purpose, then that could be used for web servers. And when you're selecting your instance type, you will be given something like this, which is going to be t3.medium or large or small. So this is basically telling you what the size is going to be for the compute services. So small means less resources, which means maybe like 4 GB RAM or 2 GB RAM, and medium would be like 8 or 16 GB RAM, and large could be like 64 GB RAM, something like that. And this is basically telling you which instance type it is, what are the hardware capabilities, and of which generation it is. Yeah, so yes. Okay, so you can create your when you are creating your Amazon EC2, right? You need to be able to control that. Now we were talking about you were controlling that using at a root level access, but how are you going to control your machine? So you can either control your machine if it's a Linux machine, or if it's any machine, you can do it by using the AWS management console, which is like a small UI, or you can do it by the AWS CLI or the AWS SDK. So CLI would be the command line prompt, and SDK would be using like an SDK for it. Okay, so I think you know the basic gist of what an EC2 instance is. Now we're going to talk about the benefits. So as a quick recap, your EC2 is nothing but just like a virtual machine which you can use on your AWS cloud. Okay, when you're creating your EC2 virtual machine, you will be given an option for AMI, which is your Amazon. Um, it's your image. Uh, what is it again? It is your Amazon machine image, in which you are basically telling you, in which you're basically saying that which OS do I want, what permissions do I want to set, and etc. All of that details comes over here. You are also selecting which instance type do you want. So this is basically saying, okay, which instance type do I want, right? This could be general purpose, and all of that comes over here. Then you're also configuring your subnets, and you are also configuring your security groups and your VPC. All of this will be cleared. All of these things will be cleared in the next video. Well, I'll be explaining you about what is a VPC. But when you are creating your EC2 instance, the EC2 instance is going to start up, and then when it starts up, you are given three options to control your virtual machine, which is either by CLI, AWS CLI, or by your AWS management console, or by using the SDK, AWS SDK. Now there are other things as well. For example, you can also have a key pair as well. And what that does is that it creates like an AWS public and private key. which allows you to only have the access to control your EC2 machine. So you can imagine this like a password that you can set for your virtual machine. So that password is shared to the AWS and is also shared to you, so that when you are opening the EC2 machine, only you have the password to it. Um, yeah. So now let's move forward towards what are the benefits, right? So these were the benefits as well, like scalability. You can scale it whenever you want. You have root level access to it. You have flexibility towards the different OS packages that you can install on it. You can use it to host virtual machines. Other than that, it is integrated with other AWS services as well. So for example, S3, RDS, VPC, we will be talking about what these services are afterwards. It's very highly reliable because EC2 instance can easily be replaced very rapidly. It also allows for security options. So when we were talking about security groups, we were basically talking about the security options. It is inexpensive because it basically goes on the model of pay as you go. So the more resources that your virtual machine is going to consume, the more you're going to pay. Or also the fact that you are going to be charged per hour on it. Yeah. So in terms of pricing, there are different pricing options. So the one that we were talking about right now was on demand pay as you go, which is per hour. The second is spot instances, and what that basically means is that if somebody is not there using their EC2 instance, then you can utilize their EC2 instance, but like you can utilize their resources. And the difference is that this is very short term, and there could be a chance in which that spot instance is limited for a very small amount of time, and then maybe some other person could use it, and then you could lose your access to it. Then you have your reserve instance, which basically means that it's very similar to your it's not similar, but oh yeah, also sorry, I forgot to mention that spot instances gives you like a discount of 90%. For reserve instance, you get like a discount of 75%, which is reserved by companies, in which you are basically saying that, okay, I am going to be using an EC2 machine with 64 GB RAM for 5 hours. And if you plan on using that for like 3 hours, then you are still paying for the entire 5 hour runtime. So you have to pay even if you're not using it. So in that case, reserve instances does gives you a discount, but be sure to like use all of the resources that you have reserved it for. Then you have dedicated hosts, in which you're saying, okay, I am going to be using this EC2 instance, and it's going to act like a physical server. So dedicated hosts are the most expensive because you are actually saying to AWS that I want a personal physical server on which I'm going to be using my EC2. So that's very expensive. Then you have also your saving plans. The saving plans is just an extension to your reserve instance, in which you are basically now defining everything that you want. So you're also defining the hardware resources you want, the amount of time that you're going to use, the amount of services that you will be using it for, which basically gives you like a 72% discount on it. And also the fact that you also have per second billing as well. So the free tier AWS allows you to have 750 hours for free. And after that, then you will be charged on the demand pay as you go service. So that was all related to EC2. I hope that you now understand what EC2 is. So in a nutshell, it's just a virtual machine on which you can run your applications on it. So you are basically configuring what OS do you want on it. So that was it.